5 agencies have falling grades on the latest IT modernization report card. The latest federal IT Acquisition Reform Act scorecard shows 16 agencies kept their grades the same, 3 improved, but no agency got an A. Dave Powner is Executive Director of the Center for Data-Driven Policy and Director of Strategic Engagement and Partnerships at MITRE. He's former Director of IT Issues at the Government Accountability Office. Dave, welcome. You won't take credit for it probably, but you're the author of this scorecard essentially, and one of the first graders on this scorecard. What's your takeaway from number 11, Dave?
Well, I thought on number 11, it's nice to see the evolution of the scorecard, Francis. You know, we talked after scorecard 10, and I testified at that hearing. It's good to see the scorecard evolve. You know, software licensing was dropped off. All agencies had A's. They added a very important category on the EIS, the modern network contract at GSA that we need to have in place so that our IT sits on a modern infrastructure. I think, with the upcoming dates there on EIS, it's very encouraging to see Chairman Connolly and Ranking Member Heiss continue that evolution of the scorecard. And I think going forward, there's some other categories that, they've kind of run their course and that we're going to see even more, changes to the scorecard. Cyber is a good area when you start looking at supply chain risk management. You'd mentioned at the intro on vulnerability management. Those types of metrics probably do need to be added to the cyber category. And that's what we testified to in August. And I know you and I talked to that. So the continued evolution is really where we need to go.
Not everybody agrees with you. There are some folks that I've heard from in agencies and some folks that have been vocal on social media and other places that the scorecard's a moving target and the numbers aren't fair. The rates aren't fair. You obviously don't agree with that. Why so?
Well, here's the deal. You added EIS, right? EIS has been around for a while. There's been some slip dates. It's very important to have that modern infrastructure to have really true IT modernization. The other thing is that the committee always previews a new category 6 months in advance. So it's not like they plop a new category on federal agencies. They preview it 6 months in advance and give agencies time to react to those new categories. So I think it's quite fair.
You mentioned that software licensing is no longer on the scorecard. Everybody got an A in it. What's in place to make sure that continues, that there's not backsliding, that this is something that needs to be measured again at some point in the future?
Yeah, so I think, Francis, when you look at that, because it's still an important category, as you mentioned, I think when you look at OMB and the federal CIO and the right performance-based metrics that you put in place out of the federal CIO's office, I think that'll be very important. Our new Center for Data-Driven Policy, we launched that in late September, and we issued a number of policy papers, and one was on digital transformation recommendations. And those recommendations were similar to what we're suggesting with the scorecard, but it's also what CIOs and the federal CIO needs to do. And I think performance-based metrics, those have worked over the years. Look at data centers when OMB set targets on closures and savings and the whole bit. And I know there's a debate about the federal CIO and OMB being just a policy shop. It can be much more than just a policy shop, Francis, and we've seen that over the years with the right metrics.
And you have talked to me on the program before about one of the reasons that you attribute success in the Trump administration was the tight working relationship with Suzette Kent, federal CIO, Margaret Weichert, who ran the president's management agenda. How do you want to see that continue in a Biden administration? What does that relationship look like on a working basis to make that success happen again?
Yeah, so I think that's a very good point, Francis. If you look at the Biden administration and some simple things that they really should focus on to build off the successes of prior administrations, one is the PMA. The PMA had a heavy tech focus. I do think with the PMA, when you look at IT modernization, that's really get to legacy modernization where we're replacing these old archaic legacy mission critical systems with the right acquisitions. I know you've had Richard Spires on recently, and he talked about a piecemeal approach to that. I think that's a very accurate assessment of the situation. So I would love to see the PMA continue what we did with the Trump administration, focus on legacy modernization. The other thing that I think the PMA should do from an IT perspective and cyber is specifically call out cyber. I think cyber is kind of implied in a number of areas in previous PMAs. But when you look at cyber and supply chain risk management, and there's this newly formed Federal Acquisition Security Council that was called for in law to be chaired by the federal CISO. There's a lot we could do to really focus more and more on cyber as part of the PMA.
You use a couple of terms in this conversation, and you've used them in the past that I want to make sure I'm not confusing. One is digital transformation, and the other is IT modernization. Are they the same thing in your view, Dave?
Well, actually, digital transformation, I think they are slightly different. I think they're used synonymously. I think right now we're looking at really transforming missions. And when you look at legacy modernization, that's really where we get into digital transformation. We need to transform the way we actually perform missions, Francis. And that's when you get into these big mission critical legacy apps that, frankly, we just kind of keep kicking the can down the road, right? And eventually you kick the can down the road long enough, you have a big failure or you have, a big security issue. I think, what happened with the state unemployment systems with the pandemic, that kind of showed, the issue with some of the state systems and the challenges we have there. We need to get out of the gate quickly with the new administration on these this legacy challenge. And I think, federal CIOs, I think the big challenge is to really partner with executives right out of the gate. They need to partner with the right business owners, get these plans in place. There needs to be execution on those plans. They need to befriend CFOs to make sure budgets are in place to support those legacy modernizations. And then, frankly, if you look at the workforce, having a partnership with Chico's where we really look at the gaps we have in our workforce and tackle those gaps with the right plans and get after it. We're not in a situation where you want to wait a year and a half down the road to have those relationships with those key executives and those key chiefs.
Dave, always more stuff to talk about than time to talk about it. Thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you, Francis. Happy New Year.